and simple things that make the life we live worth living. Among the rush, do one push up, become a better you. It's the small and simple things that make you grow into what you're hoping.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be located in the world.
It's a good day.
It is a good
Just
day.
go with that one. Good day, everyone.
Hey, everyone. It's Jeff and Jamie, and we are back with you on another one of our podcasts, and we have a very special guest today.
I've been excited for this one.
You have been. How
I
come?
have been. Because I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about.
So the thing that we're going to talk about is really related to who you want to be. Very early on, one of the things that we've done is studied a lot about people who are masters, professionals, best in their field.
Right.
And one of the things that we recognized very early on is they decided early on who they wanted to be and didn't deviate from that. For example, we talked about last week a little bit about Cal Ripken Jr., and he wanted to be a professional baseball player.
Right.
That's who he wanted to be right out of the chute.
Right.
And he didn't deviate from that and became, the Iron Man of baseball with 2,632 games under his belt consecutively.
I know. It's amazing.
And so he decided very early on who he wanted to be. And that's part of the whole streaking methodology is deciding that.
And it's fun to look at these people who seem to kind of innately or naturally go that direction, know what they want to be and know how to get there. So it's fun to talk to people that know that.
It really is.
I know.
And so one of those people happens to be Sophia Downs, who's with us today.
Why, hello.
Yes, that was very nice.
That was good. You're a natural.
She, very early on in life, decided that she wanted to be a Harvard graduate.
Which I think is cool because it's not like she comes from a family that's alumni of Harvard. So
Right.
I think some people may have had that tradition in their family, and so maybe it's not as
That's a very good
unique
point.
of a situation.
You're not
but
alumni, are you? Do you have a
Nope.
alumni? in you?
No alumni.
None.
How did you get the idea in your head that you wanted to go to Harvard? What happened there?
Right. Well, I think you have to back up even further
Oh, really?
and just know that it wasn't just one day I said, I want to go to Harvard, therefore I'm going to start doing all these things and behaving in a certain way. It was that from a pretty young age, I loved to read. Probably
great.
starting in second grade. I actually struggled with reading when I was
Now,
young.
was that something? Did your mom read to you? Did you pick? I mean, do you remember any of that? What? Tell me a little bit about that.
My parents definitely were good night stories, told me stories, read me lots of books. My dad would make up stories and read them to us.
Oh, fun.
Or just make them up off the top of my head. And he's a super creative person. So those are very fun. And my older brother and I have a lot of fun memories of those. And then we also read scriptures. So that's a big part of it is every day as a family, we would read scriptures. And after initially struggling with reading when I was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, something about it just really clicked for me. And I just loved books and was just devouring books.
Really? So
That's awesome.
So your love for learning started that young because reading akin to learning. One of the things I know, one of the statistics that's out there, and I don't know the source for this, I'd have to look at it, is you learn to read until you're in grade 3, and then after grade 3, you read to learn.
Might be a little bit further, but
Is it a little bit
might be
further? I'm not sure.
fourth or
I
fifth.
saw
don't
it
know
was third
either.
grade,
but I just love reading is huge. It just opens up the world for so many people and so many things.
which
I love
is
it.
why, just a little side note, you have a streak of reading to the
Reading to
boys.
the boys. Similar thing because I have a son that struggled with reading and it's huge because there's just this profound effect on life when you bring reading into it.
So you started to devour books and really enjoyed them. Any books in particular? Did you care what genre of book, or do you remember? I mean, I don't know if you remember that far ago.
I mean, well, I actually do because then now one of my tasks is to make book lists whenever a 4th to 7th grade girl comes through the doors of our house who likes
really?
reading.
Really?
We'll have a family over for dinner and my dad will be like, do you like reading? And she'll be like, yes, I like reading. And she'll be like, well, you should talk to Sophia. She likes reading.
She has a list.
Anyway, no, but of course I loved the Harry Potters. Anything fantasy or fiction.
Yeah.
Just kind of that take you to another world,
Yes.
immerse yourself.
I've
in
never been a big nonfiction girl. I'm trying to dabble in nonfiction now, but
I have
It's a
not
work in
been a
progress.
nonfiction boy, and I enjoy, for me, it's science fiction, fantasy, those type
Yeah.
of things. I devoured all the Harry Potter books when they first came out. I enjoyed also, coming out, I think it's on Netflix, is, and you guys wouldn't be familiar with this, but it's the Isaac Asimov Foundation series.
Oh, my dad read those.
Did he
remember
really?
them.
Yeah, and I read those, and it looks absolutely fascinating. But
Again, that science fiction.
I was
fantasy.
not a nonfiction reader, and one of the things that my job required, for me at least, it didn't even require it. I just know when I would be consulting and working with executives and smart, brilliant people, they would often say, "Have you read such and such book that was a nonfiction book?" And when I was early in my consulting career, I had not. And so I actually had to set a streak to read at least one paragraph of a nonfiction book daily.
That's awesome.
Isn't that great?
To add that nonfiction element too.
Right, exactly. Because the other one was the fiction one was simple. I mean, I could do that, but the nonfiction that was a little harder. Anyway, so I digress.
We usually do.
Yeah, several times throughout this.
But I think what a great tangent to look at it and be like, because it's something I love that it started off with. It wasn't something I was doing naturally at first, but then it caught on, and now it's something that you love and has led you to this place. And I think and then you, older, recognizing in a career situation that you're like, okay, these people who are in these positions, these guys are reading these books, and these are more current books. They are reading new stuff all the time. I want to be doing that.
Right. So Sophia, when you started reading early, and then when did you get the Harvard bug? I mean, when did that happen?
Okay, I'm gonna keep slowing down here because I want to set it up.
Okay, yeah, you should set it up.
Because I think it's hard. So I think I come from probably a pretty naturally competitive family. We whether it's Monopoly game night or whether that's Park District basketball, we like to win in this family.
I hear you.
And I think something I had always been pretty naturally competitive at, academics.
Okay.
So, funny story about this. When I was in 4th grade, a friend and I got competitive about an essay with each other, and we ended up assigning each other. We're 9 years old, to be clear. We assigned each other essays, told our teacher about it, and then ended up writing these self-assigned projects and presenting them to our class.
How fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are truly talking to someone extraordinary.
Oh my God.
How many of you
I
have
don't know
done
if it's
that?
extraordinary or just
I was playing
weird.
marbles on the
really
playground
weird.
at this time and thought if I won one of the big marbles, that would be cool.
Like, I have more stories where it's just me being you don't need to be that. It's 4th grade, Sophia. Calm down.
But that's wonderful.
But I just think that's the background of the type of person I was without really consciously thinking about it.
Right.
So then fast forward to when I'm about 12, and I honestly don't.
I want to pause you for
Go
just a
ahead.
second. One of the things that you just said that is significant in growth, and this is one of the things that we've talked a lot about, is when you're growing, it's actually a conscious activity that you decide to do. One of the things that you just said, which is interesting, is you did these things unconsciously. It's not like you were thinking about them or intentionally doing them. And this is another thing that we found in really extraordinary individuals, is that a lot of these things, for whatever reason, we don't know why, you were given the gene, and some weren't. But I don't want to say that lightly, because you put a lot of hard work into this. But at some point, I would suggest, and this may be something you're going to tell us, you moved from unconscious to actual conscious. I've got to be pursuing this. But anyway, did you have a thought on that, James?
No, that's the same thing. That's why it's so fun to talk to Sophia, is because from an early age, you were interested in these academic things. But it wasn't until something else happened that you started to be like, okay, this is really where I want to go and who I want to be. But there was some desires that were there subconsciously beforehand. And I think that's part of what I love about streaking is that some people, like I said, some people seem to have that, and other people, we have to look a little harder for it. But I love the idea that we can all look at who we want to be and be like, okay, I can get there. It's going to come in different forms, and where I end up going is going to be different places.
Right.
But there's a way to get there.
Right.
And I love talking to people who seem to innately already kind of have that methodology in place.
Right, exactly. So back to the story. Did I lose your place, or you remember where you were?
I remember.
Okay, go.
Okay. I don't remember that much of this conversation. which I'm about to describe.
Okay.
In very little detail.
It is a conversation that you had. You just don't remember the detail of it. Okay,
I was
gotcha.
12.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
But I had a conversation with my dad where he, I believe, was the first person to bring up to me the possibility of, would you ever want to go to Harvard? And yes, spoiler alert. But it's through that conversation that kind of the first idea of I want to go to Harvard, I want to be a Harvard graduate, as I say, kind of first was planted in my head. And quite honestly, it wasn't something that I was very consciously thinking about, even after that conversation.
And this was when you were what, about 12 years old?
12-ish.
Okay.
Around there, somewhere. Yeah, it's still, even from that point when I had first kind of vocalized that was the goal, that's what I wanted to do, I quite honestly went a point from 8th grade through to the end of my sophomore year of high school where I just refused to talk about college. Just absolutely refused to do it. And a big part of that was quite honestly because I very much felt like even though we had this conversation about Harvard, it still didn't feel like a real option in many ways.
Really?
Okay.
Because
How come it didn't feel like a real option?
The entire Harvard came up very much as a contrast to another school. So there was School X, as we shall call it.
You don't want to give that school away, huh?
No.
That's okay. You don't have to. That's
It's
great.
a great school.
It is a great school, and we don't. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. And I very much felt growing up that School X was the school I was going to go to, just because it made sense from a family alumni situation,
right?
From a location perspective, from having family currently at the school, from a financial perspective, from a cultural perspective. It just made a lot of sense to go there. And I always kind of felt very, I don't know if it was internal or external, possibly a bit of both.
Yeah.
But just pressured to go there.
Yeah.
And I always, since I was about 11, had kind of a backlash against it that was very illogical in some senses, because there's nothing
Backlash against
going to School X.
Okay, so you were feeling something inside of you was
11.
like, something's giving me a little bit of pressure here, and I don't want to do it.
I don't want to do what everyone just assumes I'm going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's very, and I still think about this to this day, why I had that backlash, and I don't totally know. Unless it was just so many people saying go there, and I was like, I don't want to do what you want me to do, like you just said.
That's good.
But because it's a great school, and I really think a place where, had I gone there, I really could thrive. But for whatever reason, I just kind of felt this aversion to it. And so for a large part, even after the Harvard idea had come up, I wasn't consciously thinking about it. So I continue on my merry way.
As you went along, so you weren't consciously thinking about it, but it was
But it
there.
was in
But
the
you
back of
were
my head.
consciously thinking that, or maybe just I don't want to. You actually decided consciously to not think about it and just to
Correct.
focus in on your studies, basically.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was a very conscious decision to not talk about college.
Yeah.
Like there were opportunities I remember where, you know, and looking back, I think I would have maybe done some of this differently, but where we would have a family over for dinner, and maybe, you know, a parent had gone to a very prestigious school, and it would be a good opportunity for me to talk to them about college, their experiences, whatnot. And I just refused to do it. I was just like, I don't want to talk about college.
Wow.
Interesting.
I don't want to do it.
So there was an element of pressure there that you're like, I'm not ready to deal with that yet.
I don't even want to think about it. And I think also I grew up in an area that's very college focused, very college centered.
So just an interesting little side note here, and Jamie, this is something you and I have talked a lot about, is the idea of, now from a parent point of view, I mean, your parents could have continued to bring this up and pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. Now I'm not supposing they did. I mean, you had a conversation with your dad and that was pretty much it. And then they didn't say much, but you and I have talked a lot about this. By pushing something, you actually remove a choice.
Right. Sometimes a little bit like what you said, that sometimes when you feel that push that everyone's expecting you to have to be a certain way or do a certain thing, there's something inside of us a lot of time that's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do my own thing.
How come though? I mean, what do you why do you think that, Jamie? Why do you think we push against that? And I'm curious. I mean, we've talked a lot about
I don't
different
know.
things.
Maybe
but
there's something innately inside of us that truly, I guess maybe this is what I think, is that because we've talked about this when we've talked about setting streaks, how important it is that when you set your streak, you set your own streak, that you don't let someone else set it for you, that it has to be something you decide for yourself. And so I suppose if I were to answer that question, I would be that innately, pretty much everybody wants to choose who they want to be. Even if, I mean, we all want some level of control over saying, this is who I want to be, and I'm going to decide it for myself. I think sometimes it's important that it's just a little parenting side note, because, I all have 7 children, so that's my thing. But that as you let your children choose, that to recognize that if we push too hard on things that we think are really important that they need to do, sometimes we can push them in the opposite direction, even if it's something they might want to do, simply because the desire to be who you want to be and to make that decision for yourself is really strong. And it should be. We want our children to decide for themselves who they want to be. We can encourage, and I love that what you talked about is that your family opened up opportunities. I think we can't decide to be something we haven't been exposed to. So as parents, we have a responsibility and an opportunity to expose our children to options so that they know what's out there, and so that they can make those choices. But to choose for them doesn't ever work out very well, I don't think.
And I agree. What do you think? So, I mean, Sophia.
I was just going to say, I think on the parenting note, that what my parents are really good at is opening opportunities with hard work.
Oh, that's
I
good.
think something both of my parents have been really good at is they will support us, and each of my siblings, I'm also one of 7. So each of my siblings, we have very different interests. We're very different ages. We have very different abilities and skills. And thus we're willing to work hard in different areas.
Yeah.
I have a brother who's far more athletic than I am and has worked harder in...
Older brother, younger brother?
Both.
Oh, okay. You come from a large family as well.
Yeah.
You have, 6 siblings? So
6
7
siblings,
total?
yeah. Who's able to work, willing to work harder in those areas that I was not willing to work hard in. So is that proper grammar? I don't think so. Anyway.
I think so, but
think
we
it's
will leave
okay.
it to you.
We'll let the English majors edit that.
But anyway, I think what my parents have done that's really awesome is seen, okay, Sophia really likes school. So we're going to, allow her and support her in choosing to do all these nerdy academic things and go on study abroads and whatever else. And I think it's definitely a blessing that I come from a family where I'm able to do that and have the resources to do so.
Right.
Yeah. Because what were some of the, just while we're on that tangent, just a little bit, what were some of the things that you did? I know we're in the storyline here of you decide, you decided to go to Harvard and you wanted to push that off.
Right.
So let's actually jump back to that, and then I'm curious about some of your extracurricular activities. But the story is you didn't think about it, but there came a point where didn't you transfer schools because was that already happening, or pick that up there? Yeah.
So it's funny. I never actually a lot of people think I transferred. I didn't transfer. It's just that at the end of 8th grade, I had the choice to go to the feeder school, I suppose. There were 400 kids in my 8th grade class, and basically all 400 of them go to this one high school, and it's actually the high school that my older brother went to. I have a brother currently there. Great school. And then there was another school that I could also choose to go to, and as opposed to going to the school that my older brother went to, kind of the normal choice, I chose to go to this
that
other
was
school.
the public high school.
It's a public versus a private school.
And I think we could say it was New Trier.
New Trier High School,
was
New
the
Trier
public high
Township
school.
Was
where you were at, and you could go to that one, or you could go to Loyola, and that was the private school.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think a lot of people have the connotation that when you're comparing public versus private, that the public school's education or academics may be less than the private. That is not at all the case.
Where you guys were,
this
not all the case.
situation.
Yeah.
New
You could have
Trier
gone to New Trier or Loyola and had the same opportunity to
Yeah.
go to Harvard. I mean, is that...
I mean, quite honestly, almost less at New Trier, simply because New Trier, they're both really competitive environments, but
Mm-hmm.
New Trier, there's 4,000 students. It's a really competitive school.
Oh, so it wasn't that.
And it's mainly athletes from both of our schools who end up going to.
Oh, okay, to one of the
Yeah.
prestigious schools, the Ivy League, whatever
Yeah,
it is.
it's a lot of athletes.
So you had your work cut out for you if
Yeah.
you went to New Trier. In other words,
They're-
what you're saying is academically same, but because the competition level was so significant at New Trier, the opportunity to be noticed at Harvard may not have been as great as at Loyola. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, just
I mean, it's hard to. The way I look at it is because the things happened in my life that did happen, I only could have had those opportunities at Loyola.
okay.
I don't know what the alternate universe would have been had I ended up going to New Trier.
Sounds like a fascinating new book.
Yeah,
It's the alternate universe.
coming. This is actually promo for my new sci-fi book. It's coming out in 2022. Stay tuned. That's a joke. It's not actually coming out. Nor does it
Good.
exist.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have to have Sophia on more often. Aren't
I
we?
know, this is fun.
Yeah.
So they're both competitive schools. They're both competitive environments. And I don't know exactly what would have happened had I gone to New Trier, but I do think it would have been harder
Okay.
to get into Harvard from New Trier.
Yeah.
At least for me, a non-athlete human being.
And I think that's important because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of times where, especially in our day and age, where, athletics get the notoriety. And a lot of times we'll see people that get into these schools because of their athletic ability. Not taking away anything from their
Right.
hard
They have
work.
to
I'm
work
not
hard
saying
for
that.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
they work very hard
Right.
for it. But that's another part of who they wanted to be. I mean,
Right.
they decided very early
Well, and
on.
I love looking at it and saying, okay, this is who I want to be. What's my best avenue to get there?
Right.
What are my skills?
that's a good
What's my
point.
skill set? What's my abilities that are going to fit well to get me to where I want
Right.
to be, and looking at that. And what I loved is that kind of looking at it honestly and saying, okay, this is what I'm really going to have to do that. And it puts you in a position that you're having to look at and say, okay, I've got to really make some decisions here.
Right.
And that's where I think things may have started to come from that unconscious realm into that conscious realm,
Right.
where you were starting to look at it and say, okay, I'm making certain decisions here. Maybe not in the sense of, okay, this is going to send me to Harvard, but maybe in the sense of this is going to open up my options more
Right.
and give me the
Right.
opportunity to have more of those decisions
Right.
ahead.
And
Yeah.
I think a big part of it was social/cultural driven, of coming out of a junior high with a very certain environment.
yeah.
Right.
And really feeling like, as a 13-year-old girl, I want a new environment.
Right.
I want kind of a different environment, a different setting, a different
Right.
culture.
How were your friends during this time? Did you have friends that wanted to go to that were of the same academic standing, or do you remember?
That's an interesting question. Kind of, yes. I think. That's actually a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I would say in junior high, I didn't pay attention as much
To friends.
to friends in terms of academics.
Okay.
And I think a big part of that is because for the most part in junior high, I wasn't in leveled classes or anything like that. I think once I got to high school and was in.
When you say leveled classes, you mean like honors type classes?
So yeah,
and that
honors
type-
versus AP versus
Okay.
college prep, whatever the level is.
Right.
And so because of that, I ended up just kind of being friends with, the people I was
everyone in
friends
the
with.
class.
I don't know
Right,
how to
yeah,
explain
exactly.
that. Whereas in high school, once you were really kind of leveled out, I naturally started becoming friends with people
Who had
Who-
similar
surrounded by
aspirations.
those.
who had similar aspirations.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
because
Yeah.
and that plays into one of the things we're talking about. And by the way, I wasn't trying to lead you along.
Yeah.
I was really just curious
Well, no,
about
it's
this.
true.
But
Yeah.
creating a community,
Community.
right?
Yeah. And it's very true that I definitely did have it. It's interesting. Just one memory I have is the day that our ACT, I went to a high school. All of my friends and I, everyone in our classes, we all told each other our grades. Everyone, we all knew each other's grades. We all knew how people were doing, which
Which is a community of people that cared about their grades.
Yeah.
But and you
Has
know,
its pros and cons, but it definitely brings that competitive drive in
That's
you.
true.
it is absolutely so significant. I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of the things that, because the laws of streaking are simple. It's, first of all, you choose an activity that's laughably simple. Now,
Right.
what we're talking to you about maybe it not be laughably simple for anyone,
But
but
that's
this,
the goal, not the streak.
right.
Right.
Well,
Harvard
and
was a goal.
no,
Streaks
just the
wouldn't have been
streaks. Yeah,
laughably
just the
simple?
streaks. Because
Interesting, okay.
what I'm thinking about is, Jamie, you mentioned earlier that you have to choose your own streak. And so a streak for me may not be simple for you, Sophia, but
Right.
one of your streaks may not be simple for me. So
Right.
that's those activities.
Right.
And then you keep score on that, or in other words, you keep a record, not score, but it's
Right.
a record, whether or not you did that.
Also
thing.
known as my transcript. Just kidding.
And
Kinda
then
not
you
kidding.
create a community around it. And this has always been fascinating to me. I don't know why. It's kind of the duh button that you usually surround yourself. Birds of a feather flock together. And you
Right.
usually surround yourself with the people who
Right.
are of a similar aspirational level or who really desire to be that same type of thing.
Right.
So,
Definitely. I think, yeah. So I think going into high school, there were aspects of, there was a specific program I really liked that focused on the arts and humanities that I thought was really cool. And there were some other kind of fun academic elements that I liked. But really, both schools were incredibly strong in terms of academics, and I couldn't go wrong. So I will say that a lot of my desire to go to this high school as opposed to the other one was due to social elements.
okay.
Okay.
Yes. Once I hit high school, do you want me to talk more about community? Where do you want me to go?
No, it's
Leave
really
me
we're going
alone.
where you-
Well, I liked
did,
what-
did you have a question, James?
No, I liked that you said that. So it kind of started to really become a solid, I would say, goal at this time when you hit your sophomore year.
Yes.
To a goal to
A
get
goal
into Harvard.
to hit to Harvard. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Sophomore year?
Yes. So, okay, that's a good jumping off point. Okay, my freshman year of high school, I think I'm very blessed where I have, throughout all of this, I think this conversation is a lot about what I did and what my thought process is, which is true. I was working really hard and did work really hard to get into Harvard,
Right.
but it's such a team effort. There are so many people who I couldn't have done it without. The most important two people being my parents. And I think that my parents, who I love to absolute death, they're the most incredible people on the planet, have a really great balance where I have...
Your aunt and uncle are real close to that,
They're
though, right? I mean, just
real-
That would
It's
be
like-
us.
it's like
Yeah.
your mom and dad, and then just a snitch between.
I mean, who did my
I'm
dad
teasing.
learn it from but his older brother?
Hey, there we go.
There you go.
You heard it here first, folks.
That's good. All right. Sorry.
But
Go
I
ahead.
think that something they do where they complement each other very well is that my dad is very much a dreamer who's going to come up with big kind of crazy ideas sometimes, and my mom is very much very practical and okay, how are we going to accomplish this?
Right.
And obviously it's not quite as stark a contrast as that, and they both have elements of the other, but generally that's kind of how it is. So my mom going into freshman year was very much, let's make sure that you have a course load that you can manage and that you can, do well and succeed. And what ended up happening is we did that a little too well. And so even my first semester freshman year, there was one class especially, I was like, okay, I'm like missing days of class and taking tests and doing really well on them.
Oh, wow.
And
so it was a little too easy of a
too
load.
easy. And so
Okay.
then the next semester I actually switched classes so that I could go a level up. And then, the next year when even more classes leveled up.
But right now, this is where you were making conscious decisions.
Right.
I mean, so Harvard was kind of in the back of your mind, and now you're starting to make conscious decisions and thinking, I've really got to level up. I mean,
Right.
yes, it's easy, but you
Yeah.
also are thinking, if that's my site,
Right.
then I've got to do some things differently in order to get there.
Right. I think that my mentality is I have pretty big goals, and I recognize in many ways that I sort of need to be pushing myself as hard as I can
Mm-hmm.
in order to achieve those things
Mhm.
and in order to learn and grow, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So I did this, and then my sophomore year, due to kind of a mix of outside of school and school factors, that's when I kind of hit my breaking point. And I was like, okay, so I do have limits. How exciting. Oh, to be human.
So you had kind of pushed yourself to that level where
Right.
you're like, okay, I'm a little bit. So you found where that place was, but through
Right.
experimentation, kind of trial and error.
Right. And so that was a very, very stressful year.
And that was your junior year? Is
This
that
was
right?
my sophomore year.
Your sophomore year,
My
okay.
sophomore year,
Wow.
yeah. So my sophomore year was incredibly stressful, and I was just exhausted all the time. I was having mental breakdowns like every
Wow,
week.
no kidding.
Like just
pushing
bawling my
yourself too
eyes
much.
out. It
Really?
was a disaster.
Oh,
But I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And so it came to, so then the next time that Harvard really consciously became a thought process, and you have to remember this whole time, I'm like, I don't want to talk about college. Like, I just don't want to talk about it.
Right.
Was in the spring of my sophomore year, I had to choose classes for junior year. And I wanted to take a higher level class, a higher level science class. And it was a conversation between my mom and I, where my mom, out of like very genuine concern for, hey, I just saw you have a very stressful,
After crying your eyes out every
year.
weekend.
Yeah. She's like, don't really love seeing my daughter just like angry and stressed all the time. I don't think you should do it. That doesn't make sense. And to go to back to school X, if to go to school X, you don't need to. There's no
Right.
point in doing it.
Right.
Because with the extracurriculars you have, with the academics you have, kind of continuing on this path is going to be able to get you to that place.
Right. Right.
And so it came to that point where the only reason for me to continue to take a higher level class would be if I didn't want to go there and if I wanted to go to Harvard, essentially.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, I want to do it.
I'm making a
wow.
decision.
I want to go.
Well, that is so cool. You know, this is actually a 2-part series. We're going to do this in 2 parts, and we're right at the end of part 1, where basically, you know, we're gonna stop right here for the podcast for this week.
You didn't know it would take this long.
Yeah,
2-parter.
yeah, 2-parter.
I'll be back for more, folks.
Notice, just as we close up, just this one, so Sophia's going to be back with us, and we're going to talk about the actual experience of getting into Harvard.
Right.
But really, it was quite fascinating, Sophia, what you had to choose to this point. And I would suggest that, like you said, unconsciously, there's probably some streaks that you had going, like reading every day.
Right.
You didn't even think about. I mean, that was something that was just part of it. So when we come back, go ahead, Jamie.
Well,
did you
just
have one?
the thing that I've loved as we've had this conversation is that sometimes I feel like we read stories about people or we look at what they've done and it seems like it all just happened naturally and and I love talking to individuals and finding out like what it was really like, that like from our perspective, we're like, oh, you've wanted to go to Harvard forever. And you're like, actually not really, but the seed was planted. So it was fun to see how things are planted and then how things grow and how some things really, for all of us, I think there's things that we do well unconsciously. And then there's things that we want to be that we have to move to that conscious realm. And I think a part of the process of becoming who you want to be is looking at yourself and evaluating and thinking, okay, these things I didn't even think about, but I'm pretty good at them. And they kind of naturally led me to different places. And then recognizing, oh, I'm good at that. I'm going to set this as a goal and take this to a more conscious level. I think that's all a part of becoming who we want to be, is looking at yourself and recognizing, because I do believe we all have things that we're good at that come naturally, kind of unconsciously. And we all have to go through that to look at it and then move to really truly be who we want to be. At some point, that unconscious has to become conscious.
Absolutely.
And
have
so
growth.
I like listening to the story and realizing that we go through it differently, but we have the same basic
You
kind
really
of
have to be conscious about growth.
journey. Yes,
matter
you have
what.
to be conscious about growth no matter what.
And that's why I love it when you look at it. You've got goals that are part of growth. You've got streaks that are part of growth. And you do have routines and habits that are all part of growth. And understanding how each one of those works is significant in being able to get there. Well, that's all we
That's it
have
for
for
today.
this week. And we'll
Leave
be
you on a
back with you
cliffhanger.
next week. Yeah. So if you'd like to ask us a question, please do. My email address is Jeffrey, Jeffery, at streakingmastery.com, or
I am Jamie, Jami, at streakingmastery.com. So remember, Jeff's the E and I'm the no E.
at streakingmastery.com.
At streakingmastery.com.
Jeffery.
Jami
at streakingmastery.com. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you next week where we'll catch up with Sophia again.
A better you.